Welcome to the cryptozoology show with your host, the cryptozoologist. This is episode. This is episode part three here of this seven types of Sasquatch. There was a few stories I wasn't able to fit in from the last one, and a couple more giants and some other weird tidbits, some local sort of things, and a few other sort of interesting, odd ones from out in Sudbury that few people have ever heard of. He was a very unusual Sasquatch that needed some Rogaine and sort of things like that. So we have some different ones on this one and covering some as well, some interesting sort of bizarre sort of weird, sort of creepy, like sort of tales and some giants that were found that fit right in with this sort of Bigfoot sort of like phenomena and sort of things like that. And just a little bit of hodgepodge and that sort of a thing, eh? And an update. You might get the very like literally about several million people saw this film a long time ago, but due to sort of release rights and different things, it's never been seen again. And I have the original here, a sort of thing like this, and it was just found. So we're trying to find. There was a sort of thing made of it for a VCR. So we're trying to find an old VCR where we can sort of film it off of it, and then put it up. And it's world exclusive. Of the Muskrat Lake Monster. There was two of them filmed at the same time, thought to be some kind of seals, either gray or elephant seals, possibly. But nevertheless, it's the only sort of film of this sort of Muskrat Lake Monster, right? It's quite impressive. You see the creature come out at the end, and so that sort of thing. So we're and the Duck Nest Monster, we got him ready for action next time as well, sort of thing like that. And you'll find that interesting. It seems to be some kind of bizarre mixed breed of some several kinds of birds here, right? Like only showed up the one time, never to be seen again. And very interesting. You go to this place all the time, and I mean, you would think, so wherever this bird was lost off course, but he could actually sort of fly, even though he looked like a duck that is like 4 or 5 times the size of a normal duck, right? Sort of thing like that. But also a goose, like a little bit. So whatever he was, he was definitely a sort of a one of a kind. So, but anyways, and so we got him on film, and so that'll be very entertaining for certain people. So if you've never heard of the Muskrat Lake Monster, it's been around for quite some time, and this is the only film of it, and this is one of the few films in the world of actually two water anomalies that going on at the same time, right? It's extremely rare to film a couple of lake monsters at once, sort of thing, right? So whatever they were at the end of the day, 90 some percent probability they were some kind of seals of some sort. So even though there's other phenomena in that lake of huge sturgeon that have gotten in or different sort of things, like even myself many years ago back in the 70s, I caught a muskie in there and a tiger muskie, and they never even saw or even knew that they existed in there until more recent years, right? I think it was like earlier 2000 range before somebody, another person actually, one of the ministry actually caught one of them in their nets and things like that, right? And there's also an ancient shrimp that lives in there, sort of that, and there's landlocked, sort of the smelt, sort of thing like this. So this lake has some unusual sort of things about it where you couldn't find these things anywhere else around, right, in this sort of area and that sort of thing. So it's an interesting lake. So it could very well be this Ottawa River can reach it, right? And the Ottawa River has had seals of walrus. Even a sort of carcass of a walrus was found one time in the 1800s along the Ottawa River. So there's these different sort of things that kind of prove, like I said, I show you in the book there, that seals and these others, or any kind of pinniped like sort of things, and even whales and sharks and other sorts of things quite often will go up sort of river systems and get meander lost. And if they ever happen to have pups or things like that in this sort of place, they may come back to it again, right? So it could be that the creatures don't actually live there all the time. They may just visit it or whatever. Or another theory, there was some supposedly let loose seals back at a certain point, right? So that's another sort of feasibility. I mean, you have that same theory though in many other lakes, right? So hard to know, but anyways, it'll be a sort of a. It's been a long time since anybody's seen this sort of film there. So if I can find somebody with a VCR to sort of play this, we'll get it up and running for you eventually. But anyways, we'll continue on with the rest of this interesting show about some bizarre Bigfoot like sort of cryptids here. The Camp Devron beast, sort of a 1940s era. A lady volunteer camp lady was in charge of the canteen, and like to do and likely due to the kids screaming, she liked to have a nip of booze after shutting down the canteen nightly. One night she wakes up in her cabin to go to the outhouse, and she starts heading to it with her lamp, and she hears clamoring around the tuck shop and sees this giant, she thought was a wino, trying to stick his arm in a window, stealing her booze. She screams, and the beast turns around, pulling his arm out, and the giant man stares at her with this lust. And he was possibly like 9 to 10 feet tall and had a giant beard and reeked of booze and skunk smell. She noted he was naked and may have been aroused. And she never went into massive detail as to what that sort of why she said that. But anyways, it sounded like poor Mr. Sasquatch might also had some. Sorry, I'm not supposed to laugh at these shows anymore, but I mean. I just did the idea of this as some, just some old wino guy or whatever he might have been, or it was a real Bigfoot. And not only does he want booze, but now he's lusting for this camp counselor who's been out there, right? So anyways, I enjoy it, right? So, but the creature, he's but besides stinking and all this sort of stuff and looking aroused, the creature had her bottle of scotch that she had on the counter, and he was covered in hair and had yellow teeth with big fangs. He screeched at her, and she fainted. She fainted. What is this? There's something that got cut off here again with this sort of that, but anyways, when she woke up, she had went back to the cabin, But she fainted. She wasn't even sure how long she was fainted. But the next day, there was prints of actually of a giant sort of size here. She didn't really know. They didn't sort of measure it like with the sort of, but she's guessing like about a foot and a half sort of long, right? Now, what was weird is around this sort of area just a few years later, there was some girl that had went out to look for sort of to go to the can, and around this sort of camp, and sort of somewhere something weird happened to her. Right, she sort of vanished, and the same thing. They said they smelled like this reek, and sort of and that this guy was like crawling around, and it was some kind of whoever he was, he had great big feet. They could see crushes in the ground, and now this girl's gone, sort of thing, right? So they wondered if possibly this sort of yeah, you know what I mean, if it was a Bigfoot possibly sort of thing. Like at that time they didn't know what a Bigfoot was, but they just thought he was maybe some kind of giant vagrant or something, right? Sort of thing like that. But the girl vanished mysteriously, and around that time people were seeing something like and stinking up and leaving big footprints around the camp, right? So Very strange. Some of the story was lost. It was all scribbled out on this sort of thing like that. So I don't remember whatever happened, like if they ever found the girl or whatever the case. But nevertheless, this girl sort of vanished off that. And there was another sort of story like this that was similar in another campground in Ontario, sort of thing like that. So there's been some of these, and I wouldn't doubt there's all kinds of them around, like sort of thing like that, where you may not have correlated the Bigfoot like thing in it, but it could be that that was what actually did it, right? It all depends, but some of them have these sort of Bigfootish like sort of things to them, right? Where they're pretty weird. So beautiful lake, sort of a thing like that. But whatever the case, it's sort of a right out there. But anyways, this lady seemed to think that this, hairy old hermit here, sort of Bigfoot, might have had a bit of a crush on her or whatever. So I don't know, but anyways, very interesting. The Christi Lake Bigfoot in 1940s, a camp counselor and a group of boys started paddling towards a small island reputed to be the home of a giant snake the size of a canoe that I cover in the book about the Christi Lake giant snake and many other lakes with these same similar tales, right? But this island supposedly had this Titanic-sized snake that was, yeah, big as a canoe to way bigger than the canoe, depending on the individual, especially between the 1940s and 60s era. After that, it seems to be, they start vanishing, right? Up to maybe 1970s, this sort of thing. I haven't found anything, sort of any recent sort of sightings, right? So I have no idea if these things still exist or not, but another sort of sidelight to it. But anyways, they got into they had their lunch there, right, and sort of thing like that. They never seen the giant snake, and so they decided. But I did sort of interview an older fellow, and I know this guy extremely well, right, and he was a sort of thing, and it's. I know 100% that he really did see a snake of this sort of size because this guy just I know this guy, right? So like I mean he doesn't he was extremely sort of truthful sort of a person and these kinds of things, right? Just about anything he'd be talking about, and it'd be very matter of fact sort of thing, right? So I fully believe him. I even myself personally was a witness of a much bigger snake than what they sort of claim that they can exist around here. So even myself saw one at a dam once that was mind-bogglingly huge, right? And I still don't know exactly what species that it was, but I cover that in the book too. And this lake had reports of giant snakes in it as well and things like that. But anyways, these campers, the counselor and that they decided to leave, and they packed up and sort of started paddling away, going back to camp. And all of a sudden, they look over and they see along the shoreline this sort of gigantic, sort of Bigfoot, like furry looking dude of some sort, 9 to 10 feet tall, and he had a silver beard and huge feet and hands. And they could see him, and he was like seemingly probably getting water or something like this sort of thing. And another account when they seen it, they just sort of goes, oh my goodness, like this, and sort of bolted back to camp, right? Sort of thing like that, and decided not to really sort of discuss it too much. But they were thinking maybe it could be some kind of prank on them and stuff. And the counselor started asking around, did anybody have a gorilla suit and these kinds of things? But yeah, it ended up panning out to nothing, right? Sort of thing like that. Another account, late 60s, of a counselor finding giant footprints along the lake's edge and seeing a large gorilla with big boobs screech and vanish into the trees, right? And that sort of thing. Prints, no measuring stick, but he thought they were likely between 15 to 17 inches long. Another urban funny legend that was through the 60s and probably early 70s was of this counselor who supposedly had wrestled a Bigfoot, right? Sort of story. So something like Daniel, I think Daniel Boone apparently in the 1700 or whatever there, he had wrestled some kind of Bigfoot like sort of monster that he apparently might have killed one or something, right? Sort of thing. That's one of these weird urban legends about him and that sort of thing. But anyways, this Ring of Story is kind of interesting, but anyways, the song sort of apparently this guy was out and he was out in the woods drunk or something and ran into this sort of hairy sort of hermit Bigfoot like sort of guy, and the guy was going around the camp and sort of peeking around and maybe stealing things and stuff. So this sort of monster guy, they made an actual song about him. I never seen this dude, so I don't even know if he truly exists or not. But this was the song. I can still remember the guy saying, "Oh yeah," he says, "We got a song about him," and this guy was interviewing him, and it goes like this, and I can still hear it in my mind. The guy singing it, he goes, "Tough Ted, yeah, what was it here? The song went, Tough Ted, Bigfoot mess with him, and now he's dead." That was one of the lines, right? And then, Tough Ted, don't mess with him, and you'll be next, like this sort of thing, right? So whatever this counselor guy, I guess, was some kind of legend and some big giant sort of a man himself, right? So he might have even wrestled with a sort of a Bigfoot, but I was never able to confirm this guy exists or is this some kind of like, was that these songs created from earlier tales in this camp that, yeah, you know what I mean, got passed on from counselor to counselor, and then they made up this more modern version, possibly. I have no idea, like, but I mean, whatever the case, at one point in around this sort of region, you had a giant snake reports and occasional Bigfoot like sort of sightings and this sort of thing, right? So kind of creepy, especially since you know, a few of these sort of over the years, kids have vanished in these sorts of campgrounds, and some of them under mysterious, bizarre sort of things where it would make you wonder. You might think it could actually be a Bigfoot that might have done it, like the story usually is the girl comes out or a couple of girls or whatever and they've heard noises at night and grunting and things like that and this sort of stuff, and then you know, one of them goes out to the can usually. This is like I've found at least about 4 or 5 of these that are extremely similar, all the same sort of thing here, where you've got a Bigfootish or at least hermit, big hairy guy of some sort. Whether he really is just some wild man or a real Bigfoot, that's another thing. But no matter less, he's big usually. And now all of a sudden the girl is probably grabbed by the mouth somehow, like, you know, he puts his big hand over her mouth and takes her off into the forest, sadly. And whatever he does with her after that, that's another thing, right? Whether he's, you know, so I mean, I don't even want to know, right? But the thing is, these things have happened and they're kind of creepy, right? Sort of things like that. So there is a sort of a maniacal side to the sort of Sasquatch like things that very few people like to talk about, and they all want to make them this wonderful sort of, you know, happy go lucky sort of ape man out in the forest. But I mean, the reality is like I said, you got the natives and everybody else telling you for literally thousands of years that people have been being grabbed and dragged back into caves, right? Like I said, I don't even know all the time if they actually really kill them or not. I mean, maybe they do a lot of times. So I would imagine it's a lot of things to do with a lot of things. Like, let's say I don't know, some lady and she's, I don't know, like more sort of weak, a drama queenie sort of woman, right? Sort of what is something like that. Probably a woman like that, this now the Bigfoot's got her in the cave and he wants to meet with her, and she's screaming up and down and making a noise, you know, and doing all kinds of drama queen like stuff. It could be that they wouldn't have the patience like a regular human here, and maybe just, you know, bango, and then she's either dinner or each whatever, right? Just kills her and leaves her there, right? It's very feasible. Or a male, the same thing, maybe sometimes they kill them because they might find them like some kind of rival or something or whatever, right? Like there'd be a lot of, and then you would have others that might like you and have some kind of crush on you. So now they don't let you leave, right? Like what happened to Albert Osman, they seem to be interested in him, like more like to allow him to be part of their tribe, sort of idea, right? Well, it's very feasible that some of them are like that because just like humans, right? I mean, yeah, like I said, Jean Guy loves weird sort of comedy like that. I don't mind it myself, but it's not for everybody, right? It's the same thing. It's like whatever the case, there's different viewpoints and different sort of things in wild humans as there would be in regular ones, right? So some may be cannibals, some are nice, some are this or that, just like any other sort of thing, right? I mean, why, if let's say your whole area is lush, right, and you only have 10 of yous, well, you're not going to eat each other likely. And there's nobody to rape. You're way out in the middle of sort of, yeah, in the most deepest jungle locations, right? Where you've never seen other sort of any kind of human like to Bigfoot like relatives that you might have out there, right? Sort of thing. Well, they're not going to be cannibal of any sort. So because they got lush food, salmon and the fish and all the sort of the berries and everything else around, so their continuing lifestyle would be like that, right? Unless they had a freak kid of some sort where the guy was nuts or whatever, right? But I mean, in general, you'd probably, but in another place where they might have really low food supply and they do become meat eaters and sort of things like this, and because they have human traits in certain ways, they may do these things, right? And so these stories of these 8 people grabbing us from time began is not mythology. It really isn't. I mean, sort of like I said, the Lovelock Giants exist. We're going to cover some more sort of ones here. Here's some more sort of interesting sort of ones here. The yellow top one from Sudbury, the region, the bald Bigfoot. So this guy he was quite tall. He was like I just saw a few reports around 12 feet, sort of tall, but most of them seem to be in the 8 to 10 foot range. But he was like a bigger one than typical, right, on the average sort of thing. And the guy was covered with yellow fur, and he had a beard. But what was interesting with him was he was bald on the top. So I mean, this dude needed some road gain of this sort of thing, right? But he terrorized the early sort of Arab people around the Sudbury for massive decades, at least from the 1930s all the way up until at least the 70s, right? I don't know if there's been any more modern reports. I haven't seen anything of it, but I did get interview one a fellow that he had this sort of junkyard sort of property along there, and there's caving systems way off. He's near a forest, and there's all kinds of things there, caving systems and lakes, and even like sand pits that are almost like quicksand and all kinds of stuff. It's a crazy wild place, but this whole mining area all around there sort of it's loaded full of caves, right? But this one particular individual was seen many times by all kinds of different sort of ones, right? But he saw this thing and it was digging around the sort of side of his house, digging around for looking for garbage, and he thought it was between like 7 to 8 feet tall, and he said that its head was like shiny and sort of, and he was a golden yellow sort of color to him, right? But the creature sort of turned around and looked at him in the light because this was in the evening, and he came out with a sort of a thing. I forget if he had a flashlight or some kind of lantern of some sort or whatever, right? But he saw him sort of like, and then when the creature realized that the guy's standing there, it sort of bolted and sort of leaped and flew right into the sort of tree line and disappeared, right? But many other reports. One of the best one was actually by a school bus driver and a whole busload of kids. So that's a lot of people to like to get a pile of kids to all agree and not like some of them tell that it was a fib after is really hard for me to believe. Like I mean, there's always a kid or two that can't keep their mouth shut and this sort of thing. So I think it was very convincing that they must have really seen something there, right? Sort of the thing. But I mean, this guy must have died out. Probably, it could be. Yeah, I mean, there could be some sightings that I haven't heard of, but at least that's the last I can track down. But they used to cover him in the local papers and things like that, and so he was extremely interesting. But the poor guy was missing a bit of the dew there up on the top, right? Sort of thing like that. So interesting. So I don't know the reason or whatever, right? But I mean, maybe he was suffering from that sort of sickness there where they're losing their hair and that sort of thing. Very interesting, or maybe super old one, sort of thing like that. But I mean, he was bald even way earlier, right? So I mean, yeah, that it may not have been due to age and that sort of thing, but or maybe he was already really old at this point. But it seemed to be a male. He was very big and sort of stocky, but sort of not as wide as some of the typical Bigfoot, like not as gorilla like, more sort of like human like sort of stature, a little bit, like not as wide or as big as some of them. Because I noticed a few of the reports, they sort of mentioned he was a bit on the thinner side, sort of. So, but whatever the case, he was certainly huge and way bigger than anybody else floating around, right? So, whatever he was, I have no idea, but or even if he's still big seed, it could be. But if he is, he'd have to be pretty old, sort of thing. But here's some more interesting sort of giants here. Sayre in Bradford County, Pennsylvania, skeletons measuring 7 feet in length were discovered in the mid 1800s. Their height was of a large stature. What was strange, though, was is that they had horns, and these were sent to the Philadelphia Museum, and now, of course, have vanished, right, as usual. However, I have some pictures of horned ones that have been found in other places. So these guys existed. So when these people say that these centaur like things didn't exist or whatever, they probably did. And this is probably whatever these horned humans were, right? Like, I mean, I don't really know if they had a horse body. It could be that they were even riding on a horse, as far as I know. But some kind of human like creature had big horns, but he had a face like a human and everything sort of totally human like the body and the rest, right? So I mean, very interesting anyways. But there's not just one of these. There's been numerous ones found around the world, and there is some in some collections. That it's a proven thing that some of these people grow horns. And in fact, there's a photograph of a living human being from China, and the guy grew horns and sort of thing like that. So I mean, you might have had like groups of these guys where they kept this genetic trait or whatever. So they might have been human, but like, with these strange horns or whatever, right? Some kind of weird anomaly, right? But another one here, Lampic Rancho, California in 1833, soldiers discover a skeleton that was 11 foot 9 inches long, which was covered with boulders with strange unknown writings on them. Human molars were found 3 times larger than the normal in Bratton, Tennessee. Human footprints were found in solid rock 33 inches long and 1 foot wide. These also had 6 toes each, and you'll find quite a few of these Bigfoot like ones over the years where they may have 6 toes, 4 toes, or 3 toes, right? Sort of thing. In fact, there's even been a few 2 toed sort of odd ones over the ages, right? But so, I mean, these anomalies could exist and it could be true, right? Tools found in Morocco caves are so large that the monsters that were using them would have had to been at least 12 feet tall. And I told you about they discovered the lost city of giants. with these 80, 90, 100 pound plus sort of hammers, a few examples. Come on, I mean, seriously, does anybody believe even a guy 7 feet tall could swing a 100 pound hammer all day and night? Come on, I mean, ridiculous, right? So, like, I mean, the thing, even the handles on them and the stuff, some of the things that they found would have indicated that the person would have had to been like Titanic size here, 10, 15 plus sort of foot here, or some of them, right? Sort of thing. So it's not like, I mean, for sure giants existed. I mean, there's no sort of about it. Carson City, a great number of footprints were found by a giant race of men and women, along with children. The prints of adults were 17. I don't know what happened here. They were 17 to 20 some inches long, right? Sort of thing like that. So a bird got cut out again, this crazy program. But nevertheless, sort of that's just another one there. So I mean, then you have to believe that people were running around in ancient times in wooden footprints. I mean, including people like David Thompson finding giant ones out in the snow in the so. Now in 1811, I think it was, or whatever, right? Like, I mean, so now you gotta have a guy walking around with wooden feet out in the most farthest, remotest region where there's no roads for 10 zillion miles, and some guy's making giant Sasquatch tracks in the hopes that David Thompson will come by and see them. I mean, come on, seriously, right? Like, so there's this is what I'm saying. These skeptical answers just do not fit because the historic records, these fossilized footprints that matches Bigfoot, are there, and they're all over the place, right? Like, I mean, there's been a lot of these finds everywhere worldwide in many, many places, right? Like here, Rex Gilroy, he's the guy that's he's really into cryptozoology and stuff like that. And he traces the Yowie and the uh, all kinds of other sort of Australian cryptids from thylacines and these sorts of things. But he's found like even sort of giant footprints of Megalania, Christi, and this sort of thing like that. But one of his sort of things when he was excavating, right? He actually found this fossil back molar tooth measuring an amazing sort of oh, again, this got cut out, but it was the thing was Titanic, and it would have estimated, like, if the proportions are correct and everything, that this guy would have had to have been 25 feet tall. Okay, so I mean, come on, man! Wow, 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 wow! Right? I mean, so these guys really did exist. I fully can guarantee almost 15 foot or less that people existed. Okay, and from giant armor found where they found the fossilized. So you can't even argue. It's a guy in a suit, and he's got his suit weighed over 1,000 pounds. His suit. Okay. So yeah, you know what I mean. Like, come on, man. And the guy's got like a 21 foot bed, or another dude had a 28 foot bed, and sort of like this. And his average piece of armor was hundreds and hundreds of pounds. And I mean, this guy was like so, or crowns found of them, and sort of the weapons they'd be yielding could only be, yeah, yielded by a 15, 20 foot sort of giant, right? So for sure, even up to these sorts of things, like let's say 30 foot or less, some kind of monsters out there. So whether or not, yeah, one's 100, 200 feet tall exists, that's another sort of thing. But there sure is a hell of a lot of ones between under 40 feet to 20 feet is not many, but there's enough to get a case for it fairly decent. But under 20 feet, like in the 15 to 10 and 7 foot range, 7 to 15 feet, there's literally mass gazillions of these sort of things, right? So there's too many now to keep trying to dispute this constantly, right? Because it's just not, no matter what, you're finding all the matching of what you're seeing the natives hallucinate but they're telling you the same size and everything, and you're conveniently in old days would find them in these mounds with the warrior guy how he killed them and everything. I mean, in Florida, like I said, there was giants there. There's an old case where they found the native guy was actually being killed by the Bigfoot hairy monster, and the Bigfoot hairy monster was like about 9 feet tall, and the other little guy was only about 5 foot something on him, right? And but he actually killed the Bigfoot with a poison copper dart. And this is how they would deal, and this is how they were probably able to get rid of these giants quicker because, unlike us trying to use sort of like guns and things like that, the guy might hear it sort of even wake the clicking already before you're even pressing or whatever, right? So their senses may be way more attuned. They're more likely to evade you, sort of like, and plus, just the giant muscle on them, they may escape and hide in a cave and die eventually later, and you killed the poor guy, but you're never going to find his body, right? So he may die of disease and things later and that sort of thing, right? But I mean, this is the thing is that you have to sort of keep all this sort of stuff in mind that there's a lot sort of to this. Like it's just not as simple as that they how could they be existing or whatever. Like I mean, like I said, I mean they're maybe not as many as we think. They have human intelligence because many of them are sort of human-like to a certain degree, and even great apes, even if they end up being some kind of ape-like species, it doesn't matter. They the same thing. They're intelligent enough, some of them, to even use weapons and things like that, sort of thing. So all in all, if you add this sort of up, I mean, like I said, it's an extraordinarily powerful case that you know you have native tribes and everything, modern sort of bones where they're not really massively old here, proving at least thousands of years ago that there was a big giant caveman walking around in some of them, right? Or 1,000 years ago or less or this sort of thing. So if they survived all that time and you find some that are thousands of years old or millions that you're claiming that some of them, right, and this sort of thing, this proves that they had the ability, these giant chimp men, to continue staying around like giant chimp men. They haven't changed any from more modern giant chimp men that they find with double rows of teeth. There's literally massive hundreds of mentions of these double rows of teeth giants, right? And this sort of thing, all through the United States and other certain countries as well. And so this race of people have fully existed for sure, whatever they were. And they might have been Bigfootish. You wouldn't know what they would look like in the sort of flesh. And again, this is what I'm saying. I mean, so why scientists are dubious of this? You've already looked at all kinds of skeletons that some are not that old, and you already know that giant chipmen lived in our caves, and people are just seeing them because there still is some floating around. They're just getting rarer by the minute, probably, right? And that sort of thing like this. You know, is this? But oh, here's a new sort of interesting one that that was you can go check this sort of a guy out, but this sort of guy here, he was doing some kind of weird show clearing brush in his backyard, and he lives way out in the forest, and he's heard Bigfoot stories around there before and these sorts of things like that. And normally I would be hugely suspicious. This guy looks like a bit of a character, right? So he's sort of, you know what I mean? It could be comedy, right? Sort of thing like that. However, he didn't seem to notice this, and a viewer sent him in and said, "Hey, did you see the Bigfoot on your film?" Because he was just talking about his fire and stuff like this. And I must admit, this is kind of impressive. In order for you to fake this means that you got a guy in a Bigfoot suit to run through flames here, okay? So now you're risking that your suit, I mean, a lot of them are made out of rubber and fibers that could easily probably set up in flames here. And now you've killed your buddy pulling this joke, right? So I find that sort of, and also the speed of them seems to be going pretty good for a human. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'd say it's on the higher end that he's moving quicker and a longer and a wider sort of like um, his each run seemingly is quite big for a human being if it was one, okay? And he has a pointed sort of conical head that seems extremely tall, okay? So it's an odd suit if it's a suit. So I'd say that at least this one's worth looking at, right? Sort of thing like this. But it's called the Arms Family sort of Bigfoot here, right? And the guy, so I encourage you to sort of watch it and sort of thing like that. But I mean, it's a extremely sort of interesting sort of film because the guys comes from deadly smoke area. He's not wearing a gas mask, so he had to have been hiding in this sort of stuff way over there. Now he's running through, but it would make sense if it was a Bigfoot that was hunting around there repeating. Now all of a sudden he sees this fire, he panics and starts bolting, right? So I mean, it could actually really be one, right? So I mean, uh, yeah, at least it's one worth looking at, right? Sort of a thing like that. So, but yeah, certainly an interesting one. But I kept freezing the frames, and it looks like he's came from this fire. So I mean, wow, I mean, it's a lot of like you can see there's a lot of smoke there, man. So I mean, that guy would be really risking himself. What if he tripped and fell? You can see he's even running right through sort of flames right there. So I mean, any little mistake or a trip, right? And you're running up a hill, and I mean, you got to be in decent sort of shape. You're running through that kind of holding your breath to sort of not get all the smoke because even running from there to there that would be inhaling a ton of that stuff, right? It would be all going in your lungs. So I don't know, man. It's I would say more in the probability that this guy's actually telling the truth, even though he looks like a kind of guy to me that always puts on a show. So he may be not realizing that by the way he normally portrays his shows, that him doing the same way makes this Bigfoot look sort of like that it could be a hoax of some sort, right? But at the same token, it doesn't seem to be. So I would give it more credit, higher credence that it's likely real than not, right? I also saw another fascinating one that I would suggest is highly likely, more likely real. Like I said, these ones aren't as good as the Creek Cross or so a few of the other ones who are definitely not the Patterson film and certainly not the one from Russia, right? And this sort of thing. However, this one's a lot better than 98% of them out there. He's too far away to get the great detail to say, yeah, is that a suit or not? However, if it is a suit, the guy seems pretty tall. He seems pretty big. He can clear through smoky forest area quite fast. Like a limping sort of runner could probably run this sort of speed or whatever. But yeah, it's good anyways, right? So we'll give him a higher credence as sort of thing like that. But there's another one that not Bob Gimlin, the tracker, but Bob Gimlin, this young fellow that loves doing Bigfoot sort of analysis, sort of things like that. I get a kick out of his artwork, whoever does that for him and stuff. His shows are quite good, and this sort of thing. And he covers this one where there was this a couple out from sort of a BC area or something around there, sort of, and you see this Bigfoot in behind these, and you see the interview with this couple, and they just put it on. They just do all kinds of other shows, and they just wondered what this was because they were out there, and this Bigfoot thing was behind a tree. And I mean, if that's a dude in the suit, I mean, wow, man. I mean, you must have been padded up like a trillion times more than normal and you must have sweated to death in there. So I'll give you credit for torturing yourself like that. And but the suit looks too weird to be a suit, and the way that it's grunting, and just like the whole thing about it, kind of I suspect it probably is a real Sasquatch. and sort of like a real, and this dude is one furry dude, man, or dudette, whatever it is, right? But I would give it way more probability considering the witnesses, the way these people are, considering they've had many shows on there with no interest in Bigfoot whatsoever, and all of this sort of things combined add up to more likely authentic than not, right? So I always like reviewing these kinds of films there, and even though I'm a bit leery of the way this guy presents it, sort of like this, like, but at the same time, it just could be a style, and so but nevertheless, the film in the background, since he didn't even seem to know it was there, and a viewer sent it in, right, telling him about it. Yeah, and I noticed it right away before he even started. I saw some kind of blur shooting across the screen, but then he slows it down and he can see him. And like I said, he looks tall. The running could be a human's, but again, it could be a Sasquatch's, right? But all I'm saying is I find it there's a lot of sort of stuff here going on for a guy risking himself like that. All for what, right? The guy already gets all kinds of views with him doing nothing, just mowing his lawn, right? So I mean, I don't think that he would need the Bigfoot one to boost up his ratings that much, right? So I'll give the guy the benefit of the doubt, and sort of, and I would say it's a pretty decent film. Certainly a hell of a lot better than many of the ones I've seen over the years, right? It's at least more probable than a lot of them. But anyways, stay tuned for next show. So this is finally the end of this sort of one like that. So and we'll try and keep them more serious and that sort of things. But we'll be discussing some unusual cryptids, some unknown bears, and my favorite cryptid near in the world, a mysterious microscopic miniature donkey that a baby one could almost stand in your hand, sort of thing like that. And we'll be in search of him and some other sort of things, and hopefully be able to get this a world exclusive of the Muskrat Lake sort of monsters, their sort of video. So stay tuned for that, and hope you have a nice day, and hopefully this Russian thing again calms down. The mighty Russian bear here, sort of thing, and hopefully that goes away soon somehow. I like I said, I wish if I could film myself wading around out in the icebergs and saying, "Hey, I'm a big fan of yours, so I went out here to torture myself as I'm talking to you. Please, like, what is it you really want, right?" Like, so, yeah, yeah, if you had people somehow that somebody could actually talk to him one on one without his gang around advising him or anything else, right? Like to get across to him sort of things, right? And then see if you can make some kind of an agreement, right? It's an awful shame, man, because at any time, well, nukes everything else, right? So our poor Bigfoot may be in even worse trouble, right? So, but anyways, at least this Corona stuff's calming down. Now I have to laugh. People, it's interesting how the government can psychologically bend people's minds very easily. The second that the guy tells you it's okay not to wear a mask, now every person is back to normal and being bumping into each other and everything else, believing they're greatly immune with their imaginary sort of vaccines constantly and this sort of thing. But they don't tell you that the vaccines only last a few months and they already start losing sort of 40%, 50%, 60, and it keeps going, right? So here everybody's bumping around and doing all this sort of stuff, but you have no idea how many people are carrying this sort of it right this second and all this sort of thing, right? But as again, as you can see, because a vast majority of the population actually was already probably from day one immune to it, sort of thing like that, 98+%. And the only ones that really get bad, where you're going to stay in a hospital for ages, is low immune systems and people in homes and different sort of unusual age groups and a few other odd anomalies add up for most of the sort of sickness, right? So if you had these sort of things, but it's just interesting, in a blink of an eye now, you're switched back to where everybody's, oh, I'm magically free. I'm never gonna get corona again, sort of, right? Like, but I mean, like you can see, like, there is a lot of puppeteering to these sort of things, right? Because I mean, why was it not dangerous the day before? So you had to wear the mask the day before, then you know what I mean. All of a sudden, it's not, right. So you can see that probably a lot of, like I said, with this war and everything else, there's probably a lot of puppeteers and behind the scenes that we're never going to sort of know the real truth here. And now I see advertisements constantly where they're complaining that nobody's getting the third or second vaccine. They had only gotten one because a lot of them got weird side effects from it. And now they believe it's all down and going away. And they just don't want to get sick again from a side effect of taking the next shot, like a lot of them did. And so then they just ignoring it, hoping it'll sort of whatever. Or then you got these other people where they're boasting that they've gotten their triple vaccine, but many of them already got this 2, 3 months ago. Now this triple vaccine is almost zero protection for you any further. It's not going to last like years here, right? So sort of thing. And there's probably going to be a new fake strain within 25 minutes down the road again, sort of thing like this, right? Like I said, these people probably aren't going to let this loose, right? So, but it sounds like we might get a rest for a while. So wouldn't that be nice? So hope Bill, all the gang here, whatever billionaire criminals do this, or however it's really working at the end of the day, I wish all these people would buzz off for a while, go invest in, sniffing and smoking banana peels for a while, and leave everybody alone for at least a few years or something. Give us a break, for crying out loud. I'm tired of masks, tired of corona, tired of all this sort of gobbledygook, right? So, but anyway, hopefully, sort of this goes away, like I said. But I mean, it's a scary world that sort of just blows my mind with the weird stuff that out there that we see. But anyways, stay tuned for next shows there, and hope you have a great day and take care. Bye for now.